Hey, entrepreneurs, welcome to the Enlightened Entrepreneur podcast hosted by the Scheinfeld Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation here at Santa Barbara City College. And we are here to help you create livelihoods that matter, be your own boss, and make the world an even better place. Last time we started with spring is a time of growth, and that includes starting new ventures. And so we launched this three-part podcast series designed to help you have success in competing in a pitch competition that is probably being hosted at your college or university or your high school. Here at Santa Barbara City College, we have our students preparing for the Scheinfeld New Venture Challenge. That's on April 23rd. And so competitions such as these offer a great hands-on experience to develop your entrepreneurial skills. And in preparing for that, you probably have questions. So last time we went over some common questions that students have about business plans. And this time we're going to address pitch decks. That's part of every pitch competition, and students typically have questions about how to effectively create their pitch deck. So we'll go over that today. And then next week, we'll talk about creating pitch videos that are so common these days, especially with the pandemic. Today, let's get right to it. What we're going to look at with pitch decks is 4 areas. One is, what is a pitch deck? Common misunderstandings, common mistakes, and best practices. So to start off with, what is a pitch deck and why do you need one? Pitch deck is just another name for a slide presentation about the foundational components of your business. And if you've written a business plan, the great news is that that content that's in your business plan is going to form the foundation for the content in your pitch deck. Entrepreneurs use pitch decks to convey components about your venture to stakeholders. So in a pitch competition, this can be your competition judges, it can be investors or lenders, it can be business partners that you're pitching to. Basically, anytime, like I said, you need to motivate others to take a particular action, your pitch deck and presentation will come into play. It typically includes the following slides: a cover slide, which has your logo, your business name, your name; the problem slide, which states the problem that you are addressing and also the magnitude of the problem; solution slide, or that includes a value proposition; your business model slide; target market and market analysis slide; a go-to market plan slide; a competitive analysis slide; a management team slide; your financial projections and key numbers slide; and then your traction slide, which is all about why should you get funded? Why should you win the competition? What is your current status? What have you accomplished with your venture thus far? Closing the case that it is wise for your audience to take action to support you. There are 2 types of pitch decks. One is designed to stand alone. It's not one that you will be presenting with, but rather you might submit that pitch deck to an angel investor, for instance. And so it's expected to stand alone. It might be sent with your executive summary, but you're not going to be the one presenting it, is the difference. So that type of slide deck might be more comprehensive in terms of the content on each slide. That isn't the kind of deck that we're going to focus on right here. We're going to focus on creating a deck that you actually present, which is constructed a little bit differently. The content is the same, but what each slide looks like, it's simpler because you're also giving that verbal presentation along with it. Some benefits of using a pitch deck are that it's expected. Okay, so when you're giving a pitch during a pitch competition to investors, it's expected that you will have a pitch deck. In your presentation, in your pitch presentation, it helps you control your time because all of your content that you want to cover is there, and you've worked to get it into a concise format and to present it in a way that it comes across direct and to the point so that the audience can really understand the promise for success that your venture holds. It'll really be engaging to the audience. As you know, as students, when your instructor has a particularly interesting presentation, there will be visuals with it along with the content that's being presented verbally. It's the same thing with a pitch deck. The visuals of the pitch deck will help to create a more memorable presentation. A common misunderstanding, let's go over this. I think the biggest misunderstanding about a pitch deck is that it's just a series of slides that are going to cue you on what it is you need to say. And actually, your slide deck should help you tell a story. And we'll talk more about this later, but it isn't just about presenting data. People could read your executive summary if that's all they wanted, right? You should be telling a story that includes your passion and your interest in this venture, along with all of that critical analysis and data and research that you present that really makes a compelling case for your venture success. It's also really important that you state your problem and solution up front really clearly and concisely. That'll start the story off in a way that people are understanding what they're going to be hearing about, and that will help to set a great foundation for the rest of it. Some common mistakes with pitch decks. Creating confusion in your audience kills your persuasiveness, and a confused audience is not going to follow your call to action that you're presenting in your pitch deck. So some of the things that commonly cause confusion are using jargon or acronyms. Each industry, whatever industry you're in, there are certain jargon, certain words, certain acronyms that people use. You should not assume that your audience knows what those mean. Just avoid those terms. It's not that you need to dumb this down either, to a level where it's kind of condescending. Find your way around using those or explain briefly what they are so that your audience can stay with you. The other thing is, I spoke about this in the business plan podcast that we did last week. It's super important that you're able to state your problem and solution in a really concise way up front. All right. So I talked about last time the problem solution statement, where you state the problem, the size, the magnitude, or the opportunity, and then your solution. To be able to do that in one or two sentences is really important. And that's a way that you can start off your pitch. Another way that confusion is created is in slides that the content on the slide doesn't match what it is that you're saying. Okay, so it doesn't mean that your slides have to have word for word what you're saying, because that would make a text heavy slide, and that's problematic. The points that you're presenting should be reflected on the slide. When what you're saying, when the points that you're making are different than what's on the slide, it creates a confusion for the audience. Like, am I supposed to be listening to you, or am I supposed to be looking at the slide? And they're trying to resolve that instead of just keeping with you point by point. So it's super important that way. Another thing that can cause confusion or distraction is stylistic elements on the slide that don't add to the message you're trying to convey. And I think some of the times I see this the most are when people choose those uh, slide deck templates that you can find in PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever that kind of have a corporate feel to them, but they've often got these graphics on them that don't really add to your message, but rather they just distract. Another type of thing that can be distracting is if you include clip art types of elements there. Keep the slides simple. Step back, and when you look at each slide and ask yourself, is there any element here that if I took it away, it would take away from the message? Or are there elements that I could take away that the message would still come across clearly and succinctly? Those are the types of slides that you want to create. Whenever slides are text heavy, you create a dissonance in conveying to your audience what you want them to pay attention to. If they are super text heavy, it automatically causes your audience to start reading the slide. And once they're reading the slide, you're dividing their attention between the slide and you. And what the experience that you want to create instead is that they're glancing at the slide and they're coming back to you and listening to what you're saying, glancing at the slide and coming back to you. That way you'll keep them step in step with each point that you're making. Another thing that can cause confusion is if you don't have headings on each of your slides. So all of those typical slides that I mentioned at the beginning, you should have a heading on each slide that's related to that content. Then that'll help your audience stay in sync with how you're progressing through your presentation. Okay, let's go on to best practices. So best practice number 1, create your content first and then create your slides. Now, like I said, if you've already created a business plan, you have your content. Okay, now all you have to do is to create a skeleton of the slides and just kind of type in the content that you're going to have on each slide. And that will help you then develop the look and feel of each slide. Okay, if you go in and you're creating stylistic elements first, you end up doing a lot of work that you might have to redo later. And so start with content and then add the images. It's really important for you to know how much time you are going to be allotted for pitching and adjust the number of slides to that time allotment that you have. So for instance, in the Scheinfeld New Venture Challenge, it's an 8-minute pitch and we allow 6 to 20 slides. So whatever competition you have, check the eligibility requirements and it will there will be guidance there about what the number of slide requirements is, what the slide requirement is. And if you're pitching to an angel investor, they'll also have guidelines for the slide deck that will likely include how many slides, or it will include how long you have to pitch. And so a rule of thumb is to think of no more than 1 to 2 slides per minute. If you do more than that, you're kind of overwhelming people with, switching slides and content so frequently. If it's less than that, you're having them sit there and look at the same slide for a really long time, and that can interfere with attention. And also, if you're talking to a slide that long, you probably have a lot of elements on it that's requiring all that time. And so there's probably a revision of the slide that needs to happen that way so that you can go through 1 to 2 slides per minute. Okay, now a really great way to go about this, a great best practice is to develop the story that you're going to tell. Remember, I mentioned one of the biggest misunderstandings is that with a slide deck, you're just presenting information on each slide, going from topic to topic, and I have seen slide or pitch presentations that way, done that way, and it's never very effective. What you want to do is take your audience on an incredible journey. This is this venture, something that's coming out of the very fabric of who you are, so it deserves a great story. And if we think about stories, we can break it down into like 3 different acts, right? There's always an introduction and then a build up and then a conclusion. So let's think about your story in terms of that for your pitch presentation. So in the first act, your introduction, you have a narrow opportunity of time to capture your audience's attention and intrigue them and get them excited about what they're going to be hearing about. So at this point in being a student, you have learned about creating persuasive pitches and how to capture attention. But what you want to think about here is your audience and what action you are call to action you're going to ask them to take. So if you're pitching in a pitch competition, the action that you want them to take is that you are going to be picked as a winner, right? If you are pitching to an investor, is that you want them to invest. If you're pitching to a business partner, you want them to get involved, right? So know what would be really attention getting to your particular audience. So not just to you, but to the audience that you're going to be pitching to. Okay. And so, yeah, you'll be presenting the problem and the solution just briefly that you're going to be talking about. Okay. And then in the second act, which we can call the build, this is where you elaborate what your solution is. You would likely present some kind of a demo from the customer's experience, the customer's experience of using your product or service so that your audience can really understand what it is that you're wanting to bring to market and how it's going to impact the customers' lives in a way that makes it better for them or the world better. Whoever you're creating this solution for, how are things going to be better in the world because of it? Okay. And then it's important to demonstrate that the timing is right for this venture to come to market, that there is competition, but how are you better or different than what's out there? What your competitive strategy and advantage is going to be, how you're going to manufacture this and bring it to market, who your target market is, and how you're going to reach them. All of that story about how your concept gets from idea or early prototyping to actually being a really hot concept that's on the market. Okay, so you'll want to really include great critical analysis, including your financials in there, backing it up, how this makes sense, really show the research data that you've collected, and really show that you, besides a great passion and a vision, you really have a good business model and financial model behind this whole thing. Okay, and then the third act would be the close. And this is where you are going to make your ask, whether that's, presenting the case of why you should be winning the competition. And if that's the case, how how you're going to use the funding or the other opportunities that are part of the winnings to really create a meaningful to really achieve a meaningful business milestone. Um, if you're pitching to investors, how is that funding going to be used? What can they expect if they come on board with you? You want to really create, summarize why you are the right person for them to choose at this particular time. And then you want to end on some memorable note. If you've watched Shark Tank, which I'm sure you have, you've noticed that when they end their pitch, they end on a memorable note. So you might want to go and look at some Shark Tank episodes and see some ways that people make that memorable statement or invitation at the end of the pitch. All right, so 3 parts of the story. It's important when you're telling the story that you use transitions from topic to topic, okay, so that it just isn't a choppy bunch of slides that you're presenting. So you might say, present this is the problem, and then you would talk about your solution, and a transition that you might use to talk about the market opportunity might be, and it's a great time to enter the market because you would say what it is. And then as you transition into competition, you might say something about, and because the industry and market trends are so favorable, we will have competition. And this is what we found. And then after you present that, you might say, but because we have this competition, this is our competitive strategy that we're going to implement. And this is the intellectual property and legal compliance that we're implementing, to ensure that we are competitive. All right. So another thing about telling your story is to use photos. Okay, use photos strategically. So when you're talking about your problem, show us your problem with a photo. And I'm not talking about just a little photo in the middle of the slide. Pull that photo edge to edge, and then you can use text over photo, adjusting the color and the weight of the font so that the writing shows up on the slide, so that it's that big, full impact visual of what the problem is. And you'll be talking us through it, right? And then when you talk about your solution, show us a big edge to edge photo of what your solution is, of people using it, of the product itself, or some element, some branding element of your service. Okay, really show your audience that. And then another example would be when you're talking about your target market, don't just tell us about it. Have a really nice edge to edge photo there of your target market, with text over slide with some bullet points, explaining some of the key components of your target market. All right. Now, it's important when you use photos like this not to distort them. And by distortion, I mean the aspect ratio when you expand a photo needs to stay the same. So the amount that you expand it vertically has to be the same amount as you expand it, horizontally. So if you're doing this in something like PowerPoint or Google Slides, you drag the corner of the photo to make sure that it doesn't get distorted, because distorted images in your slide presentation will be one of those distracting things, and it'll take away from the very point you're trying to make. Okay, and when we talk about photos, we're not talking about clip art. I mentioned the clip art before. So photos, they raise emotion. Think about it. Think about photojournalism when you've been reading a story and there's photos along with it. We know a photo is worth 1,000 words, right? Pictures worth 1,000 words. So photos can really evoke emotion, and emotion along with a great critical analysis regarding the viability of your venture. Bringing those two things together is super powerful. So if you can bring those two together, it makes for a really strong pitch. Okay, another thing to a way to kind of check your slides is to do the glance test. So if you glance at your slides, the question is, will the person who is viewing that get the gist of what you're trying to convey in just a glance? That's what you want it to be, right? So everything that we've talked about helps create the elements of that, not being text heavy, using bullet points, keywords, or phrases to convey your ideas. The slides should not be text heavy with everything that you're saying on the slide. It should just be those keywords that guide you and your audience through your presentation. Okay, and then the final thing is just to get to the point with in your pitch. All right, your pitch will be a lot more powerful if you figure on concise, to the point ways for conveying your concepts. Okay, um, be in command about the journey that you're taking your audience on, right? Don't take them on these little tangents. Think about think about what is the straightest line to convey the main points of your pitch from start to finish. If you're taking people on a lot of tangents as you go along, they get to the end of the journey and it can actually be tiring, right? But if you go from point to point and each point is super relevant and you're conveying it in a way that your audience can keep up with you, that's a super powerful pitch. And by the end of that, you will, typically there's a question and answer period during a pitch competition. And if you take them on this journey, you will know by the questions that you get how this went. If you get to the end of your pitch, and one of the first questions that a judge asks you is, okay, so how does this work? Or, okay, what is this? Oh no, that's not the scenario that you want to be in, right? Versus if you've taken them on this really amazing journey, then you'll get to the end and they will be able to ask you more in-depth questions. Then because of the work that you've done, you'll be able to answer those questions in a way that gives them more information to make the determination of who won the competition. Okay, so we have a question from the audience, so let's go ahead and go with this. Since the presenter wants to leave a good first impression on the audience while presenting the pitch deck, what part in the pitch deck would you recommend to focus on more to deliver a good pitch? Ooh. Well, definitely, you need to capture the attention up front. So as I've talked about, right? But here's the thing, the way a pitch deck is constructed, um, all of those elements are important. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in there. Okay, these elements in a pitch deck have served the test of time because it's what investors want to hear about. So between those things, uh, some things are going to naturally take longer. If you do a demo of your product or service, that will naturally take longer. Um, I Doing your financial analysis might take longer, and really showing that market opportunity, I think, is also super important, right? Um, I think instead of I think it's really important to step back after you have presented, after you've created your presentation. Step back and really think about, did you strike those really strongest points of your concept? Like, did you really, amplify those and bring it out? I think that is a really good test, a really good test to do. There are certain things, of course, like the cover slide and the tail end inviting questions that will come really quickly, right? So I hope that answered the question, and it's a really good question. Okay, another question that we have is a little bit more detailed. What type of font is best to use? That's a good question. Something to realize is that when somebody is looking at a presentation, whether that's projected or whether that's on the screen, say, during these times on the screen where the audience is watching it in a video or, on their computer screen, you know, um, it's actually sans serif font that works the best in those scenarios. Sans serif are fonts like Arial versus something like Times New Roman that has all the little branches on each of the letters. Uh, it's always good to simplify, especially when that's being projected. Okay, so a sans serif font is good. Make sure that you adjust the boldness such that you can see it super easily, especially if you are doing text over photo, like I suggested doing. Just make sure that's adjusted. Don't make people work hard to read to see what's on your slide. Okay, and something else that I want to close with. I've talked about the importance of presenting data. I suggest that you go into Google and search for things like how to present market opportunity on a slide deck, on a pitch, on a slide deck, And if you go to images, you'll be able to see different ways that you can present those things. And I'll also put some links in the description that can be helpful to look at, like different types of competitions where you can go and see the competition in action and see the ways that different people have presented the different type of information on those slides. Okay, and that should work out well. Remember, another rule of thumb. This is Guy Kawasaki. He says no smaller font than 30 point. That's super important. That is one of the biggest mistakes. I don't think I said that earlier. That's a big mistake, is using too small a font. Don't make your audience strain to see your what it is that you're trying to convey. Okay, so that's our time, everybody. I hope this helps you create a really awesome slide deck in preparation for your pitch competition. And definitely, as I said last time, if you like the show Shark Tank and you're an aspiring entrepreneur, do not miss this opportunity at your college, your university, your high school. Take advantage of that hands-on learning experience, because that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's about learning. It's about learning by doing. Okay. And our competition is on April 23rd. I'll put the link in the description below. It's going to be live streamed on YouTube, right? Like we're doing right now. And anybody is able to watch it. And we hope you will join us. If you like these podcasts, please let us know, like, subscribe, and share. And be sure to tune in next week, where we're going to go over pitch videos, which are something that's happening a lot because of the pandemic. A lot of people are submitting videos as their pitch. So we'll go over some of the finer points of that. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I hope you have a great week. Keep bringing your best idea to life, and we'll see you next week.